We're going to start today with a fascinating story about a group of veterans and aircraft enthusiasts in upstate New York. They lovingly restore vintage military aircraft from the World War II and Korean War eras. Their efforts to rebuild many of these planes involves engineering and building components from scratch, as many of the parts for these planes no longer exist anywhere in the world. The overall goal of the restoration effort is to preserve tangible evidence of periods of our history, so that future generations can experience hands-on appreciation of bygone eras. Then we'll learn about a U.S. Navy veteran who has dedicated his life to helping wounded soldiers as they struggle with putting their lives back together after suffering severe casualties in battle. By spending time with these vets, teaching them about his favorite pastime, fly fishing, he helps them adjust to life after their military service, and he eases the emotional struggles they contend with as they recover and rehabilitate their wounded bodies. Let's start with a look at a labor of love in upstate New York involving the restoration of military aircraft. A group of 250 aviation enthusiasts established the 1941 Aircraft Group in 1994. Let's watch.
Every Wednesday morning starts the same way at the 1941 Historical Aircraft Group Museum in Geneseo, New York. Hot coffee, donuts, and conversation around the table.
So you guys got lots of experience taking jets apart, right?
I brought my hammer and chisel.
Everybody loosens up and talks, and then another tradition we started, we have our tea time, like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We all go over in a ready room and sit down there, and we have a beer. And then you can hear the war stories flow.
Oh man, that's half the fun. We tell stories. Some are a little off color now and then. We have a lot of fun. Drink a cup of coffee and just shoot the bull with a good bunch of guys.
We'll go flying.
Ray Zemke and Jim McGurm are just two of the hundreds of volunteers who can take credit for the museum's contents. Many are veterans of World War II or the Korean War. They call themselves the 1941 Historical Air Group. For more than a dozen years, they have made it their mission to pass on their knowledge of aviation history to younger generations by breathing new life into aging military airplanes.
Come on, old man, come out and work with the young guys.
Right, the young guys.
In school, when they teach history, they teach you dates, but they don't tell you about the people that fought that war. This is what we try to do. Try to tell you about the people that fought it and the people that flew in it. And that's why we try to preserve these aircraft for as long as we can.
Restoring and housing aircraft takes space, and plenty of it. The 1941 Historical Aircraft Group Museum is located in this hangar at the Geneseo Airfield. All of the group's tools and supplies are donated. As for the labor,
on Wednesdays, we'll have people come in who will volunteer their time. Some of them are ex-school teachers, some were Kodak engineers, some are plain everyday people.
Eddie Hopkins is the chief mechanic of the group. Like many of the members, he acquired a deep understanding of aviation during time served in the armed forces. In Eddie's case, the Air Force and Air National Guard. Many group members are combat veterans. Others flew or crewed during peacetime. Still others, such as Ray Zemke, didn't take to flying until late in life.
It's really one of the high point of my week to come out here. After I retired, I was interested in airplanes, and I came out and hung around with the guys, and I joined the club. And so I got to be working on planes and flying planes. My trade was construction, so they used my talents to run the bulldozers and backhoes and all kind of neat stuff like that.
It's getting harder every year to fly these airplanes and to keep them maintained. One is the cost of keeping the aircraft flying.
A look around the hangar reveals an assortment of airplanes, helicopters, and other military craft in various states of repair. Most were built during World War II and the Korean War. This C-47 holds a special place in military history and in the hearts of the men who lovingly restored the looks it had in its glory days. Back then, the plane was known universally as the Goonie Bird.
It dropped with the 82nd Airborne Troops over San Marguerite on D-Day. And during the Operation Market Garden, it towed gliders for the 101st Airborne.
Another craft with historical significance is this B-17, which was repainted to resemble the famous Memphis Belle. The original Belle was the first B-17 to complete 25 bombing missions over Europe successfully and keep her crew alive. The accomplishment was so great that the plane and its crew were sent stateside on a public relations tour to support the war effort.
At that time, when you completed 25 missions, then you normally would go home, be assigned to other groups. Normally what would happen, the aircraft would stay in England and a new crew would be assigned to that airplane. But in this case, the Memphis Belle came home. And then it never went back to into combat.
The original Belle has been declared a national treasure and now resides in Tennessee. The plane in Geneseo is one of the few combat-tested B-17s that is still airworthy and was one of the 5 aircraft used to portray the Memphis Belle in the 1990 movie of the same name. The work that the Air Group is doing has enormous educational and historical value, but it serves another purpose as well. For the volunteers, it's a chance to revisit complex wartime memories, both good and bad, in the company of others who can identify with them. It's comforting to the volunteers to know that they can pass something of their experiences on to those who will come after.
It's very important to preserve this history for future generations and even people now to appreciate the courage and sacrifice that those that went before us and what they went through and what they endured so that we can enjoy the freedoms we have.
It's getting so that, you know, some of us older fellows know we can't climb up the ladders and do all the hard work, and these younger fellows are jumping right in there. It's working out fine. It really is.
Well, us dinosaurs are beginning to fade away, so we have to teach what we can teach and hope they learn what we know and go from there.
Joining me now to talk about the importance of honoring veteran service and preserving these vintage aircraft is Austin Wadsworth, founder of the 1941 Historical Aircraft Museum. Mr. Wadsworth is a native of Geneseo, New York, and has enjoyed a lifelong interest in flying in old aircraft and a Marine veteran. He started collecting old airplanes in 1980. Also with us today is Professor Ronald Spector of the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs, who is also a Marine veteran. Dr. Spector is one of our nation's leading World War II historians and has written several books dealing with the importance of veterans telling their stories and their desire to leave a legacy for future generations. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Dr. Spector, what made you get so interested in aviation and World War history?
Well, actually, it was sort of accidental. Even though I'd been in the Marines and been in Vietnam, I didn't have a particular interest in military history, but there was a senior professor who was an expert on World War II and was supposed to write a book on World War II, but at the last moment couldn't do it and asked me to do it. So I said that I could do it because I came to it without any prejudices, didn't know anything about it. So.
And Mr. Wadsworth, how about you? How did you get involved in it all?
I've always had a lifelong interest in aviation. It goes back to World War II. My dad was in the military. He was in France and Germany. And it just seemed like the airplanes were kind of the focal point of my interest in what was going on at that time, and it lasted right up till now.
These projects are so phenomenal that you've taken on, but it seems very difficult to restore these planes, especially when there aren't parts available. What made you take on such a difficult task?
Well, it happened a little at a time. It's a sickness that grows on you.
Sickness that grows on you.
You start with the little ones and work up to the bigger ones, and we've been very fortunate. I've been very lucky to be involved with the small ones and the large ones as well.
Do you actually go and fly some of these planes, or do you let you do? Very interesting. What's the most interesting thing that you've learned about the history of these wars over the time as being a professor and writing about it?
Well, as you mentioned, there's a great deal of satisfaction in working with veterans, live veterans, and the great satisfaction for me is when somebody who's been at a particular battle or a particular event or a meeting writes to me and says, "Yes, you got it right."
Oh,
because
wow.
That's a great relief to me.
Do they sometimes write to you and tell you got it wrong?
Sometimes they say you got it wrong, right?
I know that you guys within your area, you have, it's sort of intergenerational. You have older people that are working on some parts of the plane and younger in others. Is that correct?
We do, that's right. We're constantly looking for young people to be interested in what we're doing, and we've been quite successful.
Do you think the younger people have an appreciation for what they're doing? Do they fully understand it?
Some do. It's surprising. Some have no clue. As time goes on, fewer and fewer people remember what types of airplane did what, and it's just amazing how quickly this is all fading from everybody's memory, and the younger people particularly. But the younger ones that are interested are very interested.
Mr. Wadsworth, why do you think it is so important that veterans make sure that they download this information about the history of these wars?
Well, last I heard, veterans of World War II are dying at something like 1,500 a day. And even the ones that I've known well are getting on in years now and gradually dropping off the scene. And unless we get these stories and get them down on tape or in some way, and let the younger people hear them firsthand, which there's no substitute for, it's the best way to do it.
Hold that thought. We're going to be back in just a second. It's time for us to take a short break. Stay with us because we'll be back in a moment to continue our discussion with Austin Wadsworth of the 1941 Historical Aircraft Group Museum and Professor Ronald Spector of George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs.
Do you know which one of these Hall of Fame NFL coaches also served as a B-17 bomber pilot in World War II? A. George Allen. B. Paul Brown. C. George Halas. D. Tom Landry. Do you know which one of these Hall of Fame NFL coaches also served as a B-17 bomber pilot in World War II? Answer D. Tom Landry.
Hello again. In this first half of today's Daily Apple, we're talking about the passion of a group of men in upstate New York involving the restoration of historic aircraft from World War II and the Korean War eras. Before we continue our discussion, let's take another look at the 1941 Historical Aircraft Museum's efforts and the amazing stories of some of the veterans involved.
It was known as the Queen of the Skies. Even today, more than 70 years after it first took to the air, the sight of one is still awe-inspiring. The B-17 Flying Fortress was a linchpin of the United States military success during World War II, and it won a place in the hearts of the many men who risked their lives in it. But to understand what this old plane really means to the war's veterans, you need to know a little more about what it and they did together. The B-17 was a bomber. When it was first deployed, fighter planes didn't have the fuel capacity to protect bombers on long-range missions. So the B-17 had to rely on its own .50 caliber machine guns to protect it during bombing raids. Many B-17s were lost to attacks by the German Luftwaffe and anti-aircraft guns.
Imagine you're going off on a mission in an airplane that was designed to last 50 hours because they figured after 50 hours it was going to be shot down. And each mission is 10 hours and you're signed up for 25 missions. You do the math. Those guys had a hell of a lot of courage going off knowing that the odds were not looking very good for them coming back.
Bristling with 11 to 13 machine guns, the B-17 downed an impressive number of enemy aircraft during the war. It also earned distinction for its ability to sustain heavy battle damage and bring its crew home alive.
And you see pictures of them that have come back from missions with terrible wounds, you might say, battle damage, and yet they'll bring their crew back.
The B-17 held a 9 or 10-man crew. Each individual on board hunkered down to perform a vital role.
The worst possible position you could have been in was the ball turret gunner, because guns pointed down, everybody was shooting at them.
I'm standing in the position that I flew in, top turret, and I flew 33 missions over Germany. I felt at home there because I felt like I had a lot of protection around me.
Seeing a B-17 up close takes Richard Hilsinger back to some harrowing moments.
We did have one time where we were coming back, we were shot up real bad. We knew we weren't going to make it back to England. So then it became a choice of where we're going to land.
Hilsinger and his crew found a field to land in and were rescued by the Free French. But Les Smith was not so lucky. He and his crew were shot down over Germany during their third bombing mission.
We were jumped by fighters, and that's all she wrote. The Germans were trained to first go after the #2 engine on a B-17, then go after the pilot's compartment. And that's just what they did. They set our #2 engine on fire, and then they started shooting at us. And they were accurate, believe me.
Smith and 4 surviving crew members bailed out at 29,000 feet, but his ripcord snagged and his parachute unfurled prematurely.
I didn't expect to hit the ground alive. So I kind of said, this is going to hurt my mother quite a lot, that I'm not going to make this. And
fortunately, Smith's chute did open.
I got almost to the ground, and a German FW-190 fighter plane came toward me, and he pointed right at me. And I said, oh, this is bad. All the way down here, and now he's going to eliminate me. But maybe he was taking pictures, or you don't know what he was doing, but he banked up and waved to me and went around.
Smith landed in Holland and was immediately captured. He remained a prisoner of war until the war's end. So for him, the B-17 isn't just an airplane, it's a symbol of his youth that brings back powerful feelings.
It's kind of emotional to look at that old B-17.
Dr. Spector, the World War II veterans, it's been called the greatest generation. Why do you think that is, that generation is so important to us?
Well, the greatest generation is actually a label that came fairly recently.
Did Tom Brokaw actually coin that?
I don't think he coined it, but he certainly popularized it. I think some members of the greatest generation, though, would think that not everybody in their generation is so great. That is, during World War II, there were lots of complaints by soldiers about the number of people who got to stay home and not go overseas. They complained about strikes. They were especially mad at the miners' strike. They were resentful about people making lots of money in wartime industries. So it was the greatest generation for those who did the fighting, but that was a minority.
Mr. Wadsworth, when you think about this generation, and we talked a little bit about downloading the information to, for instance, my generation, why do you think World War II vets should be specifically talked about?
Well, I do think that they were unique. They came off farms. They came from a very small army when we went into World War II, very small. And my dad used to say that the people that won the war were the insurance salesmen, the car salesmen, the people that could think on their feet. To me, that's what the greatest generation is all about, the way that America came together and put on such a great effort in World War II.
Are all of those gentlemen that are restoring the plane vets themselves?
Most of them
the older gentlemen? Has it been a healing process for you, for them, to be able to do this kind of work?
It has for me to some extent, but more so to them, I think, because well, we have one Korean vet that has his little memorial on our location to a particular hill in Korea that a lot of his friends were killed on, and every year we have a little ceremony at it. So I think that's helpful to him.
There was a vet, I was reading about this, that started to talk about his POW experience, and everyone really stopped to listen. Tell me a little bit, elaborate on that for me.
Oh, that happens so many times if you're involved with these airplanes, because you can tell when somebody walks up to look at the airplane, you can almost feel that if they were crew or if they have a story. And the most amazing stories come out. My favorite was the blind man sitting in the cockpit, reaching slowly for all the levers that he knew as pilot, 55 years before, tears running down his eyes, and running down all of our eyes as well. Those things, I think, that were great healing for him, great healing for a lot of people. A lot of people haven't talked about the war until something spurs it, like seeing an old plane or talking to people.
What are some of the social aspects and the healing processes that people can go through when they come back from war?
Talking about the war is actually difficult for many people who come back from the war, and sometimes it takes decades before they're really willing to say anything, and that's probably why just in the last 10 years you've had this kind of huge increase in veterans' memoirs, both published memoirs and lots of unpublished memoirs. And the Library of Congress, of course, has a big project to collect the recollections and letters, diaries, reminiscences of veterans, and there are more and more of them as people get further from the war and get older.
In your museum, there's the Veterans Ready Room. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, that's a place where everybody brings their wartime photos and puts them up. We have a whole wall of guys standing by Jeeps in Korea and by airplanes, and it's just a wonderful thing. We go in there and razz everybody a little bit about the war stories they tell. Have
the camaraderie comes out at that point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Dr. Spector, what made you even get into this kind of business, the history, you know, retelling history?
There's just a lot of drama in it, and that's what attracts a lot of us, even though we get into fairly specialized things. It's the sort of the drama and the huge consequences of some of these events, like World War II, which resulted in millions of deaths, which changed the whole world.
It's been so great to listen to your stories and to have you here today. Thank you both for being here.